In the shadowy corridors of history, there exists a world where the boundaries of human potential and ethical considerations blur into a complex tapestry of ambition and secrecy. This is the realm of Super Soldier Labs, clandestine facilities dedicated to the pursuit of creating enhanced individuals for military supremacy. Imagine a place where genetic codes are rewritten, where chemical cocktails promise to transform ordinary soldiers into near mythical warriors of superhuman endurance and strength. But as we delve into this labyrinth of innovation and intrigue, one must ask, what are the costs of such power, and who truly benefits from these scientific endeavors? Our story begins in a nondescript building nestled deep within a heavily guarded military base, a site so secretive that its existence is known only to a select few. Inside, the air hums with the sterile chill of advanced technology and the quiet bustle of lab coats moving purposefully through sterile hallways. Here, in this hidden epicenter, scientists work tirelessly, driven by the promise of creating soldiers who can march longer, fight harder, and recover faster than ever before. The origins of this quest trace back to moments in history when the stakes were at their highest. During World War II, whispers of experimental drugs circulated among troops, hinting at pills that could keep soldiers awake for days without rest. Fast forward to the present, and those whispers have evolved into a sophisticated symphony of cutting-edge genetic research and advanced pharmacology. The goal? To unlock the secrets of human endurance, pushing the limits of what we thought possible. But as with any endeavor that seeks to alter the natural order, ethical questions loom large. Is it right to tinker with the very fabric of what makes us human? What unintended consequences might arise from meddling with genetics? In this world of secret experiments, these questions are often overshadowed by the relentless pursuit of military advantage. Within the labs, the atmosphere is one of hushed intensity. Researchers peer into microscopes, analyzing strands of DNA with the precision of master artisans. Nearby, advanced machines hum softly, their digital displays flickering with data streams that hold the secrets to enhanced human performance. It's a place where science fiction meets reality, where the impossible becomes merely a challenge to be overcome. Yet, despite the air of scientific advancement, there's an undercurrent of unease. For every success, there are failures, experiments that didn't go as planned, side effects that manifest in unpredictable ways. The human body, after all, is a complex machine, and altering its fundamental processes is a task fraught with peril. As the scientists push forward, they're acutely aware that the line between enhancement and harm is perilously thin. Outside the lab, the world remains largely oblivious to the groundbreaking work happening within its walls. Soldiers, the intended beneficiaries of these experiments, carry on with their duties, unaware of the alterations their bodies might one day undergo. For them, the promise of enhanced endurance is a distant concept, overshadowed by the immediate demands of their service. But within the confines of the lab, the pursuit of the perfect soldier continues unabated. With each passing day, new breakthroughs are made, bringing the vision of superhuman warriors ever closer to reality. Yet, as we peer into this world of ambition and secrecy, one must wonder, at what point does the price of progress become too high? As we continue to explore the depths of Super Soldier Labs, we'll uncover the stories of those who dare to dream of a future where limits are nothing more than a challenge to be conquered. In the heart of the clandestine facility, the air buzzes with a mix of anticipation and unease. The scientists, clad in their white coats, move with the precision of a well-rehearsed dance, each step bringing them closer to a future that both excites and terrifies them. Dr. Elizabeth Klein, the head geneticist, stands over a table, her eyes scanning the latest set of results. The data glows on the screen, numbers and graphs telling a story of incremental advancements, each more promising than the last. This could be it, she murmurs to herself. though the room around her is filled with the low hum of machinery and the distant chatter of her colleagues. The formula she has been working on for months, a cocktail of genetic modifications and advanced doping agents, promises to revolutionize the concept of human endurance. Yet, as she looks up, her gaze meets that of Dr. Marcus Hargrove, her counterpart in biochemistry, who seems to share her mix of elation and dread. "Do you think they'll ever let us publish any of this?" Marcus asks quietly, his voice laced with a hint of irony. "All this work, all these sacrifices, will anyone outside these walls ever know?" Elizabeth shakes her head slowly. "They won't, not until they're ready to show the world what we've created. And even then, it'll be on their terms." Their conversation is interrupted by a sudden commotion from the testing wing. Raised voices, a crash, and then silence. Elizabeth and Marcus exchange a worried glance before hurrying towards the source of the noise. As they enter the testing area, they find a young soldier, one of the many volunteers, on the floor, surrounded by concerned technicians. His vitals spiked. One of the technicians explains hurriedly, "We were running endurance tests, and then—" The soldier, barely conscious, groans as they help him to his feet. His eyes, usually clear and focused, now seem clouded with confusion and pain. Elizabeth kneels beside him, checking his pulse, her mind racing through the possibilities. The enhancements should have increased his stamina tenfold, yet here he is. Another reminder of the delicate balance they tread between groundbreaking science and the limits of human biology. "Take him to the recovery room," she instructs, trying to mask the worry in her voice. "We need to monitor his condition closely." As the soldier is led away, Elizabeth and Marcus remain, the weight of their responsibilities pressing heavily upon them. The project demands success, but at what cost? Each trial, each test subject, is a step into the unknown, a gamble with consequences they can only begin to imagine. "We can't keep pushing them like this," Marcus finally says, breaking the silence. "There's a line, Elizabeth, one we might have crossed without realizing it." She nods, knowing he's right. Yet the allure of what they're on the verge of achieving is undeniable. It's a siren call that draws them further into the abyss, where ethics blur and ambition becomes a double-edged sword. Elizabeth's mind races, torn between the scientific breakthroughs that could redefine the battlefield and the haunting image of soldiers pushed beyond their limits. As they walk through the sterile halls of the facility, Elizabeth and Marcus are acutely aware of the eyes on them, scientists, military officials, and test subjects alike. Each seems to carry the weight of expectation, a collective hope pinned on the promise of invincibility. The pressure is palpable, an invisible hand steering them toward decisions that, in quieter moments, they would question. In the observation room, they watch the latest trial unfold. A young soldier, Chris, is undergoing the next phase of testing. The serum, a cocktail of genetic enhancements and performance boosters, is administered with precise timing. The room is filled with the hum of machines monitoring every heartbeat, every breath. As Chris begins his regimen, Marcus points to the data on the screen. "His vitals are holding steady this time. That's a good sign." Elizabeth nods, trying to focus on the positives. If this works, we could see a reduction in fatigue, increased stamina, maybe even a significant boost in cognitive functions. Yet, beneath her professional demeanor, doubt lingers. These enhancements, while promising, come with risks that are not yet fully understood. The psychological effects are particularly concerning. There have been whispers among the staff about changes in behavior, heightened aggression, unstable moods. Side effects that could turn their creations into liabilities rather than assets. As Chris completes his session, he steps off the treadmill, his face a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. Elizabeth offers a reassuring nod as he exits, but inside she worries about what happens when the enhancements become permanent. They've seen minor successes, true, but at what cumulative cost to the soldiers' humanity? Later, in a dimly lit conference room, Elizabeth and Marcus sit with General Hawthorne, the man spearheading the military's interest in the project. His presence is imposing, a reminder that their work is not just an academic exercise. "We need results, Elizabeth," General Hawthorne says, his tone firm but not unsympathetic. "The world is changing, and we must change with it. The stakes are too high to ignore the potential here." Elizabeth meets his gaze. "I understand, General, but we must also consider the ethical implications. We're altering human lives in ways that are unprecedented." General Hawthorne leans back, steepling his fingers. "Isn't that the point? We're here to push boundaries, to ensure our soldiers have every advantage. We can't afford to let ethics hold us back." Marcus shifts uncomfortably in his seat. "But at what cost? We're seeing behavioral changes that could compromise the integrity of the soldiers. Loyalty, decision-making, these are critical." The general's eyes narrow slightly. "And those are concerns we'll address, but for now our focus must remain on the bigger picture." As the meeting concludes, Elizabeth and Marcus feel the weight of the general's words. The project's success is paramount, yet the ramifications of their work continue to haunt them. They are scientists, yes, but also stewards of the lives they touch. Outside, the sun sets over the facility, casting long shadows across the compound. Elizabeth stands at her office window, watching the horizon. She's reminded of the ancient myth of Icarus, who flew too close to the sun on wings of wax and feathers. The warning is clear. In their quest for greatness, they must be careful not to fall. Back in the lab, the team prepares for the next round of tests. The atmosphere is tense, a mix of anticipation and apprehension. Each step forward is a leap into the unknown, a venture into a future that promises both glory and peril. As Elizabeth and Marcus review the latest data, they find themselves at a crossroads. The potential for success is immense, but so too is the possibility of unforeseen consequences. They are charting a course through uncharted waters, where every decision could alter the trajectory of countless lives. In the quiet moments, away from the lab's bright lights and constant hum, Elizabeth reflects on the journey thus far. The thrill of discovery is tempered by the responsibility she bears. She knows that the path they walk is fraught with challenges, but it is a path they must navigate with care and conviction. And so, as the night deepens and the facility settles into a restless silence, Elizabeth and Marcus resolve to press forward. The dream of creating a new breed of soldier, a super soldier, looms large, but it is a dream that must be pursued with caution, lest they unleash something they cannot control. Elizabeth sat in her small office, the shadows of the dimly lit room dancing on the walls, as she contemplated the enormity of their task. The facility, usually buzzing with activity, was silent now, save for the occasional distant clang of metal or the hum of the ventilation system. Her thoughts were as restless as the night itself. Across from her, Marcus was hunched over a stack of reports, his face illuminated by the soft glow of his laptop. They had been working tirelessly, pushing the boundaries of science in ways that seemed both thrilling and terrifying. Marcus glanced up, sensing Elizabeth's unease. "You're thinking about the risks again, aren't you?" he asked, a note of understanding in his voice. His eyes held a mix of excitement and concern, mirroring her own conflicted feelings. Elizabeth nodded, her fingers absently tracing the edge of her desk. "I can't help it, Marcus. We're treading into unknown territory. The ethical implications alone keep me up at night." Marcus leaned back in his chair, considering her words. "I know what you mean. But think of what we could achieve. soldiers who can endure the harshest conditions, who can heal faster, perform better. It's revolutionary. But at what cost? Elizabeth countered, her voice barely above a whisper. The human body is complex, and tampering with genetics and doping on this scale, it's playing with fire. Marcus sighed, running a hand through his hair. That's why we're doing this carefully, step by step. We're not just scientists, Elizabeth. We're pioneers. And sometimes pioneers have to take risks. Elizabeth knew he was right, but the weight of their responsibility felt heavier than ever. She looked out the small window of her office, watching the moon cast its pale light over the compound. I just worry about what could happen if something goes wrong. If we push too far, too fast. Marcus stood and walked over to her, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. We'll be careful. We have to trust in our work, in our team. We'll make sure that what we create doesn't become a threat. She met his gaze, finding strength in his confidence. You're right. We need to keep moving forward, but we'll do it with eyes wide open. We owe that to ourselves and to everyone who might be affected by this. They fell into a comfortable silence, both lost in thought. Outside, the wind rustled through the trees, a gentle reminder of the world beyond their walls. The project was risky, but the potential benefits were too great to ignore. As the night wore on, Elizabeth and Marcus knew they were on the precipice of something monumental. The next day brought a renewed sense of purpose. They gathered their team in the lab, the air charged with anticipation. Elizabeth addressed them, her voice steady. We're about to embark on the next phase of our experiments. It's crucial that we maintain our focus and integrity. We have a responsibility to ensure that what we're doing is safe and ethical. The team nodded, understanding the gravity of their mission. As they dispersed to their respective tasks, the lab buzzed with a mix of excitement and trepidation. Elizabeth and Marcus retreated to their office, poring over data and refining their strategies. Their minds were consumed with the possibilities and the potential pitfalls. Marcus, ever the pragmatist, voiced his concerns. We're dealing with human lives, Liz. We can't afford to be reckless. Elizabeth nodded, her gaze fixed on the computer screen. I know, Marcus. That's why we need to be thorough. We need to understand every variable, every possible outcome. The weight of their responsibility hung heavily in the air. The Super Soldier Project was unlike anything they had ever undertaken. It was a delicate dance of science and morality, where one misstep could lead to catastrophic consequences. As the days turned into weeks, the team made significant strides. They meticulously documented every change, every anomaly. The initial tests on lab-grown tissues showed promise. The cells responded well to the genetic enhancements, displaying increased resilience and longevity. Encouraged by these results, Elizabeth and Marcus decided it was time to move to the next stage, animal trials. This was a crucial step, one that would bring them closer to the ultimate goal of human application. The lab was transformed into a high-security facility, ensuring that no detail was overlooked. The animal trials were both fascinating and harrowing. The subjects, specially bred for this purpose, began to show remarkable changes. Their endurance levels soared, their recovery times shortened. But with these enhancements came unforeseen challenges. Some animals displayed aggressive tendencies, their behavior unpredictable. Elizabeth watched the footage, her brow furrowed. We need to understand what's causing these behaviors. It's crucial that we address this before considering human trials. Marcus agreed, diving into the data with renewed determination. They spent long hours analyzing every piece of information, looking for patterns, seeking answers. The pressure was immense, the stakes higher than ever. Meanwhile, The military overseers grew impatient. They wanted results, tangible evidence that the project was progressing. The pressure from above was palpable, adding another layer of tension to an already fraught situation. One evening, as Elizabeth sat in her office, the phone rang. It was General Harris, the project's primary sponsor. His voice was calm but firm. "Dr. Moore, we need to see progress. The higher-ups are getting restless. We're counting on you to deliver." Elizabeth assured him they were making headway, promising a comprehensive report soon. But as she hung up, she felt a knot in her stomach. The clock was ticking, and the margin for error was shrinking. In the coming days, the team redoubled their efforts. They worked tirelessly, driven by both the promise of groundbreaking discovery and the looming shadow of potential failure. Elizabeth and Marcus knew they were walking a fine line, one that could alter the course of their careers and lives forever. As they sat together, reviewing the latest data, Marcus spoke softly. "We're onto something incredible, Liz. But we can't lose sight of the ethics. We need to be sure." Elizabeth met his gaze, her eyes filled with resolve. "I know, Marcus. We'll get it right. We have to." With renewed determination, they pushed forward, and aware that the next phase would bring them one step closer to their ultimate goal and one step deeper into the unknown. Days turned into nights as the duo tirelessly pored over endless streams of data, their lab bustling with a quiet intensity. The air was thick with the scent of chemicals, the soft hum of machines a constant backdrop to their whispered conversations. Elizabeth adjusted her glasses, her eyes scanning line after line of genetic sequences. Marcus, seated beside her, scribbled notes in the margins of his tablet, his mind a whirlwind of possibilities and contingencies. "Look at this." Elizabeth pointed to the screen, her voice tinged with excitement. "The latest trial shows a remarkable increase in stamina, but we need to understand why." Marcus leaned closer, peering at the data. "If we can isolate the factors contributing to this enhancement, we might just have a breakthrough." Their conversation was interrupted by a sudden knock at the door. It was Dr. Keller, their supervisor, a stern figure known for his meticulous nature and unyielding standards. He entered, his presence commanding immediate attention. "How's the progress?" he asked, his eyes flickering between Elizabeth and Marcus. "We're making headway," Marcus replied, choosing his words carefully. "The enhancements are promising, but we're still analyzing the long-term effects." Dr. Keller nodded, his expression unreadable. "Remember, this project's implications extend beyond our lab. Any misstep could have unintended consequences." Elizabeth and Marcus exchanged a glance, the weight of his words settling over them. "We understand," Elizabeth assured, her voice steady. As Dr. Keller left, the reality of their situation crystallized. They were not just scientists, they were pioneers standing at the precipice of a new frontier. The potential to revolutionize military capabilities was tantalizing, but the ethical minefield was treacherous. Later that evening, as they wrapped up their work, Elizabeth paused, her mind drifting to the soldiers who would be the recipients of their discoveries. "What if we're wrong, Marcus? What if our pursuit of advancement leads to unforeseen harm?" Marcus sighed, leaning back in his chair. "That's the risk, isn't it? But think about the lives we could save, the missions that could succeed because of what we're doing here." She nodded, though doubt lingered at the edges of her thoughts. "It's just, sometimes I wonder if we're playing God." Marcus gave a small wry smile. "Maybe we are, but maybe that's what's needed to push past our human limitations." Their conversations often reached these philosophical impasses, moments where science and morality collided, leaving them to navigate the gray areas in between. Yet, despite their reservations, their commitment never wavered. They were driven by the belief that their work could redefine the boundaries of human capability. As the weeks passed, their efforts began to bear fruit. The modified compounds were showing increased efficacy, and the preliminary genetic modifications were stable in test subjects. Reports from field simulations were promising, suggesting that their innovations could indeed enhance endurance and resilience in real-world conditions. But with each success, the stakes grew higher. Elizabeth and Marcus knew that soon they would have to present their findings to the military higher-ups, a prospect that filled them with both anticipation and dread. The implications of their work were staggering, and the potential applications seemed endless. Yet, the weight of responsibility bore heavily on their shoulders. One evening, as Elizabeth sat alone in the dim light of her office, she pondered the moral complexities of their experiments. She thought about the soldiers who would eventually carry the burden of these enhancements, wondering whether the advantages would outweigh the risks. The line between enhancement and exploitation felt perilously thin. Marcus, sensing Elizabeth's turmoil, knocked lightly on the door. "Elizabeth, you all right?" he asked, concern etched on his face. She looked up, grateful for his presence. "I can't shake the feeling that we're crossing a line, Marcus. We're playing with forces we only partially understand," she confessed, her voice tinged with unease. Marcus nodded, sharing her concerns. "I know, Liz, but if we don't push these boundaries, someone else will. At least here, we can try to ensure it's done ethically, with oversight." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Besides, our work could save countless lives. Isn't that worth the risk?" Elizabeth sighed, knowing he was right, but unable to fully quell her worries. "It's just, I wish we had more time, more certainty." Marcus placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We all do. But remember, we're not just scientists. We're pioneers. And pioneers often step into the unknown." Their conversation was interrupted by the sudden buzz of Elizabeth's phone. It was a message from General Thompson, requesting an urgent meeting the following morning. The timing was unexpected, and both knew it likely meant their work was about to enter a critical phase. The next day, Elizabeth and Marcus stood before a panel of military officials, their presentation meticulously prepared. As they outlined their findings, the room remained silent, the air thick with anticipation. Elizabeth could feel the eyes of the panel scrutinizing every detail, every implication of their work. General Thompson leaned forward, his expression unreadable. Quote, Elizabeth took a deep breath, aware of the delicate balance she needed to maintain. Quote, 7. Marcus added, quote, 8. The general nodded, seemingly satisfied, but still cautious. Quote 9. As they left the meeting, Elizabeth and Marcus felt a mix of relief and renewed pressure. Their project was moving forward, but the stakes had never been higher. They returned to the lab, determined to uphold their principles while navigating the murky waters of military ambition and scientific progress. Back in the lab, the team redoubled their efforts, aware that the eyes of powerful figures were now upon them. Elizabeth focused on refining the genetic sequences, aiming to minimize any potential risks identified during the presentation. Meanwhile, Marcus worked closely with the field operatives to gather detailed feedback from simulations, analyzing every piece of data to ensure the stability and efficacy of their compounds. The soldiers participating in the tests became an integral part of the process, providing invaluable insights into the practical applications of the enhancements. Elizabeth and Marcus made it a point to engage with them regularly, listening to their experiences and concerns. One soldier, Corporal Jenkins, stood out with his candid feedback. Quote 10, he said during one of the debriefings. Quote 11. Elizabeth noted his comments with interest, aware that understanding these psychological nuances was crucial. Quote 12, she assured him. As the weeks turned into months, the project advanced steadily, each small success building upon the last. Yet Elizabeth's initial unease never fully dissipated. She often found herself questioning the broader implications of their work, wondering if they were truly prepared for the impact it might have on the world. One late night, while reviewing data in the quiet solitude of the lab, Elizabeth received an encrypted message. The sender was anonymous, but the content was clear. Beware. Not all share your vision. There are those who seek power, not progress. The warning sent a shiver down her spine. She knew they were treading dangerous ground. But the message confirmed her fears that there were hidden agendas at play. She shared the message with Marcus, and together they vowed to remain vigilant, protecting their work from those who might misuse it. In the midst of these challenges, Elizabeth and Marcus found strength in their shared vision and dedication to ethical science. They understood that the path they had chosen was fraught with risk, but their commitment to improving human potential kept them moving forward. As their project reached a pivotal stage, the world outside the lab was changing rapidly. Global tensions were rising, and the demand for enhanced soldiers grew more pronounced. Elizabeth and Marcus knew that their work could tip the balance of power for better or worse. With each passing day, the line between scientific innovation and ethical responsibility became increasingly blurred. But in their hearts, Elizabeth and Marcus held onto the hope that their efforts would ultimately lead to a better future, one where the boundaries of human capability were expanded not for domination, but for the good of all humanity. And so, with resolve and a cautious optimism, they continued their journey, navigating the intricate dance of science, ethics, and ambition, ever mindful of the fine line they walked in the pursuit of progress. As the sun set on another long day in the lab, Elizabeth and Marcus found themselves deep in conversation, grappling with the implications of their work. "We have to be careful, Marcus," Elizabeth said, her voice tinged with concern. "We can't lose sight of why we started this project in the first place." Marcus nodded, understanding the weight of her words. "I know, Elizabeth. It's easy to get caught up in the possibilities, but we must remember the responsibility we bear. This isn't just science. It's shaping the future of humanity." They paused, the gravity of their mission hanging in the air between them. "We need to ensure that every step we take is guided by a moral compass," Elizabeth continued, her eyes filled with determination. "If we don't, we risk becoming the very thing we set out to change." Marcus looked at her, inspired by her unwavering commitment. "You're right, Elizabeth. And that's why we need to proceed with caution, ensuring our work doesn't become a weapon of exploitation," Marcus replied, his voice steady yet carrying a hint of concern. Their conversation was interrupted by a soft knock on the door. Dr. Lian, their colleague and expert in genetic coding, entered with a subtle urgency about her. "We've got a situation," Dr. Lian announced, her tone grave. "One of our test subjects, Subject Delta, is showing unexpected side effects. I think you both need to see this." Elizabeth and Marcus exchanged worried glances before following Dr. Lian down the sterile corridors of the lab. The air was thick with the hum of machinery and the faint echoes of footsteps as they approached the observation room. Subject Delta, a young soldier selected for the trial due to his outstanding physical capabilities, was exhibiting signs of extreme distress. His vitals were spiking erratically on the monitors, and he appeared to be struggling against invisible restraints, his muscles twitching uncontrollably. "What happened?" Elizabeth asked, her eyes fixed on the monitors. "We administered the latest compound, an enhancement designed to improve cellular regeneration and stamina. It worked initially, but then his body started reacting unpredictably," Dr. Lian explained, her voice tinged with concern. Marcus studied the data flashing across the screens, his mind racing through possible solutions. "It looks like his body is rejecting the enhancements. We need to stabilize him before it escalates." Elizabeth nodded, her mind already formulating a plan. Let's initiate a neutralizing sequence to counteract the effects. We need to bring him back to baseline before we lose control. The team sprang into action, their movements coordinated and precise. Elizabeth's hands moved deftly over the controls, inputting the sequence that would hopefully reverse the adverse reactions. The room was tense, every second stretching into eternity as they waited for signs of improvement. After what felt like an eternity, Subject Delta's vitals began to stabilize. The erratic spikes evened out, and his breathing returned to a more regular rhythm. Relief washed over the team, but the incident left a lingering sense of unease. "This isn't just a setback," Marcus said, breaking the silence. "It's a reminder of how volatile this work can be. We're treading on dangerous ground, and one misstep could be catastrophic." Elizabeth absorbed his words, the weight of their responsibility pressing heavily on her shoulders. "We need to reassess our approach," she said firmly. "Every variable, every potential outcome. We can't afford to let ambition blind us to the risks." "Doctor," Liane nodded in agreement. "We should also consider involving a wider range of experts. Maybe there's something we're missing, a piece of the puzzle that could help us manage these side effects better." As they returned to their office, the trio was united in their resolve to find a safer path forward. The incident with Subject Delta had been a wake-up call, a stark reminder of the fine line they walked between innovation and peril. Meanwhile, back in the shadows of the military hierarchy, whispers of the project's potential were growing louder. High-ranking officials were eager for results, their eyes fixed on the promise of an unstoppable force on the battlefield. But with each breakthrough, the ethical questions loomed larger, casting long shadows over the lab's achievements. Elizabeth knew they were running out of time. The pressure to produce tangible results was mounting, and the military's interest was becoming more insistent. Yet, she remained steadfast in her commitment to ethical integrity. Quote 31. She reminded her team during their next briefing. Quote 32. As they delved back into their research, the team was fueled by a renewed sense of purpose. They pored over data, seeking insights and solutions that would allow them to harness the potential of their discoveries without sacrificing the well-being of their subjects. But as the project progressed, Elizabeth couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. There were too many coincidences, too many unexplained phenomena. It was as if someone or something was monitoring their every move, waiting for a moment of weakness to strike. Still, Elizabeth's determination never wavered. She was driven by a vision of a future where science and ethics coexisted harmoniously, where the pursuit of knowledge didn't come at the expense of human dignity. As the days turned into weeks, the team made slow but steady progress. They refined their protocols, adjusted their formulas, and continued to gather invaluable data. The path forward was fraught with challenges, but Elizabeth and her team were unwavering in their resolve to navigate it with integrity. Yet, in the corridors of power, the clock was ticking. The military's patience was wearing thin, and the demand for results was becoming more insistent. Elizabeth knew that the stakes had never been higher, and the choices they made in the coming days would determine not only the fate of their project, but also the future of countless lives. As Elizabeth sat hunched over her cluttered desk, a soft but urgent knock interrupted her thoughts. It was Dr. Marcus Hale, her trusted colleague and confidant. His usual calm demeanor was tinged with an edge of anxiety that Elizabeth immediately noticed. He began, closing the door behind him. Elizabeth sighed, rubbing her temples. Quote 35. Marcus nodded, but his eyes betrayed the conflict he felt. Quote 36. She leaned back in her chair, staring at the ceiling as if the answers might be written there. Quote 37. Marcus placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Quote 38. Elizabeth considered this, the gears in her mind turning rapidly. She said, slowly. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sudden blaring of her phone, a shrill reminder of the urgency that loomed over them. It was General Prescott, the gruff voice of authority that had become all too familiar. Elizabeth hesitated before answering, steeling herself for the conversation ahead. Quote, 41. The General's voice crackled through the speaker. I trust you have good news. Elizabeth took a deep breath. General, we're making significant progress, but we're not at the demonstration phase yet. The science is promising, but we need more time to ensure it's safe and effective. There was a pause on the other end, a silence heavy with expectation. Dr. Carter, let me be clear, Prescott finally said, his tone firm. The brass is getting impatient. We need to justify this project, and for that, we need results, preferably sooner rather than later. Elizabeth knew she was walking a tightrope. General, I propose we conduct a series of simulations. These will provide a detailed projection of our progress and potential outcomes without compromising safety. Prescott Gr. unted, his patience visibly thinning through the phone line. Simulations, Dr. Carter, can only take us so far. We need tangible evidence, something we can present as a definitive success. You have a month to deliver preliminary results that demonstrate the viability of your enhancements. Elizabeth swallowed hard, the weight of the deadline pressing on her shoulders. Understood, General. We'll do everything we can to meet your expectations. As the call ended, Elizabeth leaned back in her chair, staring at the ceiling. The lab was quiet now, the earlier buzz of activity replaced by a tense silence. She knew the clock was ticking, and the pressure from above was only going to increase. She had to lead her team through this storm without losing sight of the ethical lines they had sworn to uphold. Marcus entered the room, his face a mask of concern. I heard. A month isn't much time, Elizabeth. I know, she replied, rubbing her temples. We need to ramp up our efforts, but ensure we don't cut corners in the process. If we rush, we risk everything. They both knew what was at stake. The promise of enhanced soldiers, capable of withstanding environments and challenges far beyond current human limitations, was alluring. But the potential for misuse, for creating something monstrous, loomed large in their minds. Maybe we should focus on controlled field tests, Marcus suggested, breaking the silence. We could start with basic endurance and adaptability trials, see how our prototypes handle stress. Elizabeth nodded, considering the idea. It makes sense. We need to gather as much data as possible to address the General's concerns, but we also have to keep a close eye on the subject's well-being. The concept of field tests brought a new set of challenges. They had to ensure the safety and consent of the soldiers involved. These were men and women who had volunteered, perhaps not fully understanding the implications, but trusting the scientists to do right by them. As they set about organizing the logistics for these tests, Elizabeth felt a mix of anticipation and anxiety. The simulations had shown promise, but real-world conditions were unpredictable. They needed to be prepared for any eventuality. The first group of soldiers arrived at the lab the following week, their expressions a blend of curiosity and determination. Elizabeth and Marcus briefed them thoroughly, explaining the procedures and potential risks. It was crucial they understood this wasn't just about physical enhancement, but also about pushing the boundaries of human capability. Each soldier was fitted with monitoring equipment designed to track their vitals and performance metrics. As they began the initial exercises, Elizabeth watched closely, every data point scrutinized for signs of stress or irregularities. Marcus asked, joining her at the observation window. Quote, 46. Elizabeth replied, eyes fixed on the monitors. Quote 57. The tests progressed over several days, each session more demanding than the last. The soldiers showed remarkable resilience, their enhanced abilities allowing them to recover from exertion quicker and perform tasks with heightened efficiency. Yet, Elizabeth couldn't shake the nagging fear that they were missing something, a critical variable lurking in the shadows. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the lab, Elizabeth sat alone, reviewing the data. Her eyes drifted to the latest batch of results, something in the numbers catching her attention. A pattern, subtle but undeniable. "Marcus," she called out, her voice echoing in the empty corridor. He appeared moments later, sensing the urgency in her tone. "What is it?" "Look at this," Elizabeth said, pointing to the screen. "There's an anomaly in the recovery data. It's minor but consistent across all subjects." Marcus frowned, leaning in for a closer look. "What do you think it means?" "I'm not sure yet," Elizabeth admitted, "but we need to investigate. If there's an underlying issue, we have to identify it before it escalates." The anomaly, small as it was, could be nothing, or it could be the first sign of something more sinister. As they dove deeper into the analysis, Elizabeth felt the pressure mounting. It was a race against time, against the expectations of the military, and perhaps, most perilously, against the unknown consequences of their own creation. The lab was silent except for the low hum of computers and the rhythmic tapping of keys. Elizabeth's mind raced as she sifted through the vast sea of data, searching for patterns, inconsistencies, anything that could offer clarity. Marcus, by her side, was equally engrossed, his brow furrowed in concentration. Elizabeth said, pointing at the screen. Marcus glanced at the data, his face expressionless yet tense. "Quote 67, quote 68. Elizabeth replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "Quote 69. Marcus leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his hair. "Quote 70. Elizabeth hesitated. "Quote 71. "Quote 72. Marcus insisted. "Quote 73. Elizabeth knew he was right. The ethical implications were staggering. The idea of creating soldiers capable of extraordinary feats was tempting, but not to the cost of their humanity. She thought of the young men and women who had volunteered for the program, trusting the science, trusting her. "Quote 74, Marcus suggested. "Quote at 75. Elizabeth nodded. "Quote 76. The walk to Dr. Sutherland's office felt longer than usual, the weight of their discovery heavy on their shoulders. As they approached, Elizabeth took a deep breath, steeling herself for the conversation. She knocked on the door, and a stern voice invited them in. Dr. Sutherland sat behind his desk, papers scattered around him. He looked up, his eyes sharp behind wire-framed glasses. Elizabeth began explaining the anomaly and its implications. Marcus supported her findings, adding details about the aggression levels. Dr. Sutherland listened intently, his expression unreadable. When they finished, he leaned back in his chair, contemplating their words. Quote 79, he finally said. Quote 80. Quote 81, Marcus interjected. Quote 82. Dr. Sutherland sighed, rubbing his temples. Quote 83. With that, the call ended, leaving Elizabeth and Marcus in a tense silence. They knew the stakes were high, and the line between groundbreaking advancement and catastrophic failure was razor thin. As the days passed, the team worked tirelessly, pushing the boundaries of what was scientifically possible. They ran simulations, conducted controlled experiments, and monitored the test subjects with a meticulous eye. Their latest batch of trials showed promising results. Soldiers displayed increased stamina, sharper reflexes, and an uncanny ability to recover quickly from injuries. The data spoke volumes, yet Elizabeth couldn't shake the feeling of unease. There was something unsettling about the way the soldiers responded to the enhancements, as if their humanity was slowly being eclipsed by the modifications. One evening, as Elizabeth was reviewing the latest reports, Marcus burst into her office, his face flushed with urgency. "We have a problem," he said, handing her a tablet. On the screen were disturbing images and video footage from a recent field test. The enhanced soldiers, once calm and composed, were exhibiting erratic behavior. They were aggressive, unpredictable, and dangerously volatile. "This isn't just a glitch," Marcus said, his voice laced with worry. "It's a flaw in the enhancement process. If we don't address this, we could be unleashing a force we can't control." Elizabeth's heart sank. The very thing she feared was becoming a reality. They had pushed the envelope too far, and now they were facing the consequences. She knew they needed to act fast, but the pressure from the higher-ups was relentless. They wanted results, and they wanted them now. In a desperate bid to buy time, Elizabeth and Marcus decided to confront Dr. Sutherland once more. They presented their findings, highlighting the potential risks of continuing the program without addressing the behavioral issues. To their surprise, Dr. Sutherland listened intently, his demeanor more receptive than before. Quote 87. He said, finally. Quote 88. With renewed determination, the team intensified their efforts. They delved deeper into the genetic modifications, searching for the root cause of the instability. Days turned into nights, and the lab buzzed with activity as they raced against the clock. Finally, a breakthrough came. By adjusting the genetic coding and fine-tuning the enhancement formula, they managed to stabilize the soldiers' behavior. The aggression and unpredictability diminished, replaced by a controlled intensity that was both powerful and manageable. Relieved but cautious, Elizabeth and Marcus prepared a comprehensive report for the military leadership. They outlined the challenges they had faced and the solutions they had discovered. It was a delicate balance, but they had succeeded in creating soldiers who were not only enhanced, but also safe to deploy. The presentation was a success. The military brass was impressed, and plans were set in motion to implement the enhancements on a larger scale. Elizabeth and Marcus had achieved what many thought impossible, but they knew the journey was far from over. The ethical implications of their work would continue to haunt them, a constant reminder of the fine line they treaded. As they left the briefing room, Elizabeth turned to Marcus, her expression serious yet hopeful. "We've done something incredible here, but we must remain vigilant. The power we hold is immense, and we have a responsibility to ensure it is used wisely." Marcus nodded, understanding the weight of her words. "Agreed. Let's make sure our legacy is one of progress, not destruction." With that, they walked away, knowing that their work was far from finished, but hopeful that they had taken a step in the right direction. In the world of super soldier labs, the quest for perfection was ongoing, and the challenges were ever present. But for now, they had succeeded in balancing the scales of ambition and responsibility. If you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe. Comment what you want to hear next. As they exited the lab, the sterile white corridors seemed to stretch endlessly, echoing their footsteps. The weight of their discovery was palpable, yet there was an undeniable energy, a pulse of potential that coursed through the air. Marcus and Dr. Langston knew that they were standing on the brink of something monumental, a threshold between what was and what could be. Marcus glanced over at Dr. Langston, her face a mask of determination. "You know," he began, breaking the silence, "when I first signed up for this project, I thought it was just about improving physical capabilities. I never imagined we'd be dealing with ethical dilemmas that could redefine what it means to be human." "Dr. Data," Langston chuckled softly, a sound that resonated with both amusement and resignation. "Science has a way of surprising us, doesn't it? What starts as a quest for knowledge often leads to questions we never expected to ask." They continued walking, passing by rooms filled with equipment and other scientists absorbed in their own research. Marcus couldn't help but feel a sense of camaraderie with these individuals, all of them united by a shared vision, yet each grappling with their own set of challenges. As they reached the main exit, Marcus paused, looking back one last time. Quote, 94. Dr. Langston stopped beside him, her eyes following his gaze. Quote, 95. Outside, the sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the ground. The world beyond the lab was vibrant and alive, a stark contrast to the controlled environment they had just left. As they stood there, the enormity of their task loomed large, yet so did the hope that accompanied it. Marcus said suddenly, as if struck by a revelation. Quote, 97. Dr. Langston nodded slowly, her mind already racing with possibilities. Quote, 98. With renewed purpose, they stepped into the cool evening air, the hum of the city around them, a reminder of the world they were striving to protect. It wouldn't be easy, and the path ahead was fraught with obstacles, but they were ready to face whatever challenges came their way. Together, they would navigate the murky waters of ethics and innovation, determined to forge a future where the power of their discoveries was harnessed for the greater good. And as the last rays of the sun dipped below the horizon, they knew that while their journey was just beginning, they were not alone. The world was watching, and with that knowledge, they were more committed than ever to ensuring that their work,